Hello and welcome to On the Road to Treatment with Lauren Huffmaster and Jessica Buscho. I'm Lauren and I am the founder of Adventure Therapy Foundation. I'm also a stage 4 breast cancer survivor, and Jessica is here with me. She is also a stage 4 cancer survivor with colorectal cancer. Today we want to talk about the emotional impact of cancer. At Adventure Therapy, we're very interested in serving our community around the emotional side effects of cancer. We want to minimize them, but we don't want to eliminate them. The emotional side effects of cancer play an important role when you're in treatment and recovering from those treatments. The problem comes when those side effects are still in your life 5 years and 10 years down the road. Those side effects should not persist for years and years beyond treatment, but sometimes they do. And actually, statistically, they do. But how can we make those stop? And what role does the emotional side effects of cancer play in the experience of cancer? So Jessica, I'm so glad you're here with me. What do you think about how the emotional side effects of cancer impact you as a survivor?
Hi, I'm happy to be here. The emotional part of cancer is sometimes easy to ignore because you're going through the physical side effects of it or just logistical side effects. But definitely the emotional part is the most consistent presence in your cancer experience. It's the part that makes you feel happy when you have good scan reports. It makes you feel anxious when you're going into scans or gives you that scan anxiety that we've talked about. Uh, Uncertainty brings sadness sometimes. And there's a healthy amount of fear that I think, people have mixed feelings about fear, but fear of what is inside of you and what is there if you don't do anything is what makes you do really hard things like chemo and surgeries and other treatments that make you feel terrible. And that fear and that emotion is part of the experience too.
Definitely. I actually wrote a blog about this because there's different kinds of fear, right? There's like the fear around the first date, and you get all nervous and you're worried and don't know what to wear. But that fear, that little bit of fear that's in your life, makes you try harder, right? And it helps you remember that instance longer because your mind's capturing every detail. And then there's like what makes a roller coaster scary, right? And those that like elevates how well you experience something. So there's all different kinds of fear, but there is sort of this irrational fear about things that have never been and never will be. And that's the negative kind of fear that we really want to eliminate from our lives to the greatest extent possible. But in the cancer experience, there is the
Yeah, I think it's
yeah, sorry. Around the cancer experience, there is this fear that goes with your treatments because every day you go to treatment, you don't know what to expect. A lot of people have terrible responses to chemo, even not the typical like nausea, loss of hair, but like really whole body responses to chemo. And so there is a level of fear that just gets you to treatment, that gets you through those chemo sessions, but it's that energy that moves you through the process when the process is really bad.
so, yeah, I think that without that fear, I'm actually allergic to one of the treatments that I've done. And I did close to 20 sessions after finding out that I was allergic to it. But without that fear of the disease itself, it would have been really easy to quit the treatment, even though we knew the treatment was working. Eventually, it got to be where it was too dangerous and, you weigh your options and it doesn't work out anymore. But I, I feel like that fear kept me going on a treatment that asked a lot of my body.
Now, what other emotions are besides fear do you think you experienced, Jessica?
I definitely experienced anxiety around my scans. We did a whole talk about that. Um, and that's different now too, because I'm also allergic to one of the agents they give you in the scan. So the anxiety has been a little fresher the last few scans. And then the scan itself doesn't make you feel good. So even if your scan results are going to be great, there's anxiety about feeling not good during the scan. And so yeah, anxiety is a big one. And then the mountaintop highs are really noteworthy, because you go from that deep low of feeling anxious and worried about the scans to good news sometimes. And I think that it's those low lows that make the highs even feel higher.
Yeah, we often talk about the roller coaster of emotions you go through with cancer, because you get good test results in your blood, but then you have this anxiety going into scans, or you have, you finish your last chemo, but then you enter into something completely different and you're worried about the unknown of what the next treatment is coming down the road. And so I remember specifically is like you get a good scan for, I'll just give you an example. So the first time I had a scan that showed no evidence of disease, as you can imagine, I was like mind blowing excited. Like I couldn't even process. It was so like this level I never even understood. So I just couldn't process it. But my heart was like growing in hope for the first time in 5 years. It was just like swelling with this hope, right? Then I went in to see my oncologist, which is normal after you have a scan, and she told me it was a false. It wasn't true. That it wasn't a real no evidence of disease. And then instead I was in this like really bad time where my cancer was mutating and I would probably have a lot of spread in the next 2 months. That was her response. So you can imagine I went from this, my heart was being vulnerable and swelling with hope and happiness for like the first time in years. And then I go into this oncology meeting and she just like crushed it and smushed it around and told me to keep being afraid and keep like being, terrified to eat or do whatever, all these things that my fear draws me into. And I mean, in the course of a month, I was like as high as I could possibly go and as low as I could possibly go because of two different interpretations of one scan. But this is just one example of like the entire cancer experience. You get these high moments from one doctor and low moments from the other, or from one treatment and low moments to another. It's just this constant roller coaster. Do you experience that too, Jessica?
Yeah, I definitely have highs and lows. And I've had, similar experiences where we thought we interpreted one thing and it was something else. And it's taken me on a ride. I find that I'm currently struggling with sharing that fear with other people. So my caregivers or close friends, um, and taking them on the ride. There's a certain amount of necessity to it, because going through that alone is certainly not okay, but also feeling like you're dragging, people through, especially when we talk about kids, So at this point, we almost always wait a week or so after results to make sure that nothing has come up out of nowhere before sharing anything with the kids, and usually try to formulate a plan if it was negative news, or make sure we phrase the positive news in a way where they don't think mom's cured and this is over now.
And one important thing to do, so Adventure Therapy, one of our new programs we're launching as we start to reopen is cancer coaching. And one of the phases of the cancer coaching is going to talk about these different emotions, all the different emotions we experience in the cancer experience. And the idea is that we don't just feel happy, sad, or fearful and anxious. There's so many different emotions we experience along the way. And just because we experience something for a moment doesn't mean we have to get stuck there forever, right? Emotions pop up. We can be happy that it's a beautiful day outside and scared that we have scans next week at the same time, right? We have all of these things coming and going inside of us at all times, but it's important for us to not try to hold them down necessarily and like push them down and be afraid of the fear, be afraid of the emotions, because it's actually healthier just to acknowledge that they're there and keep moving forward and be expecting something else to come down the road and not get stuck in one place. Have you ever had a time where you
Yeah,
got,
and I feel like Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like the pressure to be present and to ignore those feelings as a cancer patient is as bad as the feelings themselves sometimes. Like, let that pressure go and feel it.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said before, sometimes your lowest lows allows you to have these really high moments. Sometimes that cry releases more than just what you're feeling in that moment, but like all the pressure build up, and then you can be present moving forward. And so there is just a lot of, but with emotions and with cancer and really with mental health nationwide, we don't have a really good grasp of how to deal with these big turmoils in our life. There's not a lot of discussion around mental health and trauma that's just common knowledge.
Yeah, it's definitely an area for improvement. And when we talk about like equity and access too, like it's an even more of an area for improvement in underserved communities, or maybe communities who haven't been taught. Because with mental health, a lot of how you talk about it depends on what you were taught as a child, you know, and cancers are random. So it doesn't pick only the people who know to talk about their feelings. And uh, trying to learn how to do it while you're in the storm is really hard.
Definitely. But at the same time, not dealing with it is this whole stress and this pressure that you're holding inside while your body's trying to heal. And I don't claim to know how it works, but we do know that stress leads to, problems in your body, right? And depression can lead to physical ailments. And we know that somehow, in some way, these emotions are impacting the health and the wellness of our body.
Yeah, so I have a really good example for that. My hair stayed in for partially for chemo, right? I didn't lose it all for treatment, but my hair is really responsive to stress. And my hair is also really responsive to cancer growth. So when my cancer is growing, my hair is falling out. And when I'm really stressed, my hair is falling out. So if I think my cancer is growing, it starts falling out like crazy. And then because I'm stressed, and then I assume, well, it's the cancer. My hair is falling out. The cancer is getting aggressive. So it's really, that's one where the physical manifestation of the stress causes more stress. So got to get that under control maybe, but it's definitely, we've all had that where you feel more sick or you get a headache or whatever because you are so, worried about what's going on. And sometimes it feels like it would be better to just share it, say it, own it, and then put it somewhere and go on to the next.
Yeah, one of the things I really encourage people to do is not to hide from it, right? It's not going to go away just because you're not dealing with it, you're not acknowledging it. You have to be able to sit with it until you're okay that you and this fear is in the same room, or you and this hope is in the same room. I personally probably hide from hope as much as I do from fear, because the lack of, if the hope doesn't come through, then it is such a heartbreaking process. But you have to be able to sit with these emotions and be okay that you're coexisting, because we can't always control how we feel, right? Especially when you're in this chaotic kind of situation like cancer and treatments and all the people responding to you. You can't control how they're going to respond to you, but you can control how you are sitting and just being okay. If I'm frustrated, just be frustrated for a moment. Don't let it become who you are. And sometimes when we deny that we're fearful or we're frustrated, that's when we carry it with us the longest. But instead, we acknowledge it, we become okay with it, and then we learn how to move forward with these parts of us, because our emotions and our emotional response are part of us. And so we have to learn how to function to be the best version of ourselves with these emotions in our lives.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of palliative care. I know everyone has different experience with it, but as a stage 4 patient, there's a little bit of misunderstanding that palliative care is the same as hospice, but palliative care, ostomy support or diet support, think like really physical help like that, but it can also include a mental health component. And sometimes that includes medication when you need it. But I think where we run into trouble is assuming that everyone there's a blanket approach to this sort of fear and anxiety around a stage 4 diagnosis. And then we get into over prescribing medications when they're not necessary, and maybe some coping strategies could be taught. But I do think, I mean, medications to handle those feelings are necessary in some situations. I know there's some specifically for the type of chemo that addresses colorectal cancer that is necessary because the side effects, it helps with other side effects too, but it also helps you feel calm for the actual treatment. But a palliative care team can really help you work that out. And I've been sort of asking questions around palliative care lately because I was curious, what is it that makes palliative care so valuable? Is it the help with a social worker? Is it the dietary help? Like things like that. And I've been exploring a little bit, and it's actually like the palliative care doctor or the referrals that they give that is actually the value. Like someone listening to what you're going through besides the treatment of the cancer, and then being a resource to say, hey, have you tried this or have you tried that? Because there's a lot going on all at once, and you might not realize that you need help talking about your feelings or therapy, or that you're experiencing, you know, emotional side effects of cancer. You might not even realize that because you're so busy dealing with the physical part.
Definitely. But this idea of palliative care, it is sort of a newer topic in hospitals. I know that when I was diagnosed, I asked about it and my doctor was like, no, we don't do that here. So I think only some of the bigger hospitals have the resources to provide it. But it is definitely something worth asking because more and more organizations are bringing it into their systems of care. So that will definitely grow in the coming years, I'm sure. All this conversation reminded me there was a post that was put on social media for Adventure Therapy, and it was quoting me, and it said, purpose is the antidote to stress. And you responded and you said you totally believe that. Now, what do you think? Purpose as an antidote to stress. If you're not going to take medication, maybe we find some purpose, and that helps us sort of strengthen ourselves and head out there and do the hard things. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I am probably the queen of that. Every room that's redone in our house is done because I had big scans coming. Uh, so stress makes me feel like I need to be busy. So I have spent, you know, you and I talk about what it feels like to be wondering what your scan results are going to be. And I've spent those weeks since I go in this cycle doing different things. And like last year, the first one during the pandemic, I learned the ukulele. And then the second one, we built a rock wall in our backyard. The third one, I cleaned my garage. Specific to focus on, then it gives me direction and probably something I can control. And having something that I can control and see a start and a finish where there's clear boundaries really takes that stress away, because cancer is something that it feels like there aren't boundaries sometimes.
And for me, my purpose is all about adventure therapy. You know, I love it when I meet a new family that needs someone to encourage them, needs to know, you know, if there's anything out there to help them along. I love it. It makes me so excited. Not for them that they're in a bad situation, but that I can be there for them, that somehow they found me, they found my organization. And then now I have the opportunity to really help them and to move them along, to make sure they don't feel like they're alone, that they don't have to be afraid of everything, that I can give them enough information to eliminate that uncertainty. All of that just makes me feel like my cancer has a purpose. Like if I have to live my entire life with cancer, well, I know why, because I was able to help all these hundreds of people through their cancer process. And that makes it much, it just makes it worthwhile. It makes it important to me. And, in many ways, I'm glad I have it so that I can be there and help other people. But it definitely eliminates that stress. I'm not stressed about my cancer. I'm not, it doesn't make me anxious. I'm just, it's got purpose. And so I just have to, but I do, maybe like you, I live into that purpose day, night, and everywhere in between. I'm always trying to think of something. I'm always trying to help somebody. I rarely take any mental breaks. I really push into that purpose just all the time.
That's good because my cycle probably drives my family crazy.
I'm not saying mine doesn't.
At least you're consistent.
But it is a good.
I do find myself offering people more advice when I need it most. I mean, unsolicited sometimes, but or maybe just checking in on my cancer friends more when I feel like I need to be checked in. And I always thought it was like me, sort of putting out there what I need, but maybe it's just that purpose makes me feel less worried about my own uncertainty.
Well, it's taking your weakness and making it a strength for other people, right? Like you're saying, well, if no one's checking in on me, then no one's checking in on them. So at least I'm going to fill their gaps, even if no one's filling mine. And you get to turn that need into a gift. And that's always the most beautiful thing we can do with our needs, is to make them somebody else's strengths.
I love that.
Is there anything else? What other major emotions dominate the cancer experience for you, Jessica?
Sometimes why me? I don't know how I label that. Because I was so healthy before. And not that I want someone else to take my place and have it, but it's frustration, I guess. Like I did everything right and still ended up with a type of cancer that doesn't make any sense at all, especially for me to get colorectal cancer when things that make you get colorectal cancer are not my lifestyle typically, so but in young onset, it's not necessarily that lifestyle choices directed the cancer. So I have a fair amount of frustration sometimes over that. I feel a lot of hope. I'm just like a really hopeful or optimistic person around progress in science. And sometimes people keep me in check, especially my friends who are connected to the science too. And they're like, or even my doctor, sometimes I'll send him something and he's like, this is not ready yet. You cannot take something from a petri dish and put it in your body, because I get too excited about the science. But it's sort of that feeling that something better is coming that for me makes, I'm about to hit 4 years on cancer treatment. And in those 4 years I had about 7.5, 8 months off back in 2018. So that sort of hope and optimism is what makes me keep going, because I think there's some people who are diagnosed late stage and told you're going to have cancer in your body for the rest of your life. And they're like, why bother? Mm-hmm. So for me, I think I lean into that a lot.
I do too, definitely. I think that I think my Facebook or Instagram says, like, I believe we're the first generation of true survivors, that cancer is not going to be impacting the next generation the way we are. It's impacting us. And especially when I was first diagnosed, I just sort of did the math in my head and I said, well, I've got 5 years to live without treatment. I've got 7 to 10 with treatment, but in 10 years, boy, they're going to have exactly what I need to keep it where it is or to just get rid of it altogether. And it's crazy now. I'm, 6 years into that 10-year timeline. which 10 years was sort of supposed to be my max. But now I have less cancer in me than I did 6 years ago. But it's so much just this positioning of your mind. What do you believe? Are you moving toward an end where you're going to die? Like you said, it's people who don't have hope. Are you moving toward like, I know somewhere out there, there is my cure. I just have to keep going until I bump into it, until I find it or someone finds it for me. And then you're just positioning yourself to like go grasp the rest of your life, you know? But that, again, going back to how stress changes our chemical makeup, we get headaches, we get, you know, our shoulders get tight, our muscles get tight. It changes the way our body functions. I think where you see yourself, I mean, that sounds weird, but I think how much hope you can hold in you, you know, how much purpose you can hold in you, it changes how your body is going to function at some level. And like I said, I'm not a doctor. I don't know how that works, but we have to just acknowledge that at some level, our expectations and our mental disposition is impacting our life as well.
Well, and I can speak to that specifically from a colorectal cancer perspective. There's so many, sorry, I'm still on my colon cancer awareness month kick, but there's so many young people that there's an assumption that something is going on that's new, that is increasing the cases of colorectal cancer. And what's being studied a lot right now is actually the gut microbiome, which is like what kind of good bacteria live in your gut all along your digestive tract. And, you know, it might turn out that they find out, I mean, I don't know where they are yet, but they might find out that depending on how much stress you have a higher pH or a lower pH or something that doesn't let that good bacteria live and is leading to more cases of colon cancer. So specifically in colon cancer, that might be an impact. They've also actually started studying how different stress levels impact different medications too, which is interesting because if you're taking a pill, it might absorb differently depending on what the pH of your gut is. So it does affect it. I'm not a doctor either, but it's being studied. So someone else thought it too, just to validate you there. And I wanted to say one other thing about something that you said, which was staying on the winding path to find your way to whatever it is that'll be your treatment. And I think that's such a beautiful analogy for what your retreats are too, right? Like, or what the purpose of adventure therapy is, to use nature and being outdoors and adventure to help fuel your soul for the adventure of cancer, I guess, if you want to call it that, but not just the emotional part of cancer, but for being flexible about how many different treatments you might have to find before you find whatever works for you.
Thanks for bringing that up. You know, it is, there's so many things about being outside, being an adventurer, being in nature that's important to me. But one of the things is that when you're in treatment, you go so much from like small room to small white room to this doctor to that doctor, to this treatment to that treatment. They're all in like these little tiny spaces that you start to think in little boxes. Everything's got its own little box. And we forget that we're like one person and it's all interacting in one you know, environment. And one thing about the adventures and being in nature is that you step out into the ocean right now where I am, or you get into a mountain and it's just this vastness, you know, it's just, it stretches on and on and on. And you start, it just, again, changes the way your mind thinks. You can just, those boxes stress me out like crazy. Like nothing stresses me out more than being in a box or a house or a room all the time. But you step into nature, you step anywhere, wherever you are, and you just take in all the interactions and all the sounds and, you know, the wind and the sun and the clouds and all these things that are happening at the same time in this openness. And there's just something that changes in me, at least, that I don't feel like I'm trapped. I don't feel like I'm trapped into this medication or this diagnosis or whatever. I just literally can feel the opportunities that are interacting all around me. if I can just think like them and sort of help them find each other, like you said, this winding path, help me find my way, rather than feeling like I've only got this box today. And if this box fails me, then I'll only have this box tomorrow, you know? And so it just really should, I hope that my retreats really refresh people's minds and get them to take down some of those walls and open those spaces a little bigger.
Ours did.
Well, I'm glad. I'm very glad. And I hope that I can give you another one as soon as COVID's over. But yes. All right. Well, Jessica, do you have anything else you want to say this morning?
I don't think so. That I appreciate this conversation. I think it was really beneficial. It's something people don't talk about.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to On the Road to Treatment with Lauren Huffmaster and Jessica Buscho. And check our YouTube channel, and we'll do more conversations every week, and you can find them there on our YouTube.